The desert evening spread wide in gold, the kind that burned quietly before nightfall. Colt Avery rode alone, his horse's hooves thudding softly in the dying light. The bounty poster in his saddlebag was worn at the edges, one more face in a long trail of ghosts. He didn't hunt for money anymore, not really. He hunted because stopping meant remembering. The wind scraped across the rocks, dry and hollow, whispering like a prayer gone unanswered. As he crossed the basin, he heard something, not the cry of a hawk or the rattle of wind, but a voice, a woman's voice. It was faint, broken, echoing along the canyon walls. He slowed his bay mare, hand brushing the grip of his revolver. "Who's there?" he called, his voice flat as stone. No answer, only the low murmur of water ahead. He dismounted and followed the sound, boots crunching on grit, until he reached a narrow stream cutting to the canyon floor. There, half hidden behind a fallen branch, was a woman. Her skin was dusted with blood and dirt, her hair tangled with desert grass. Her eyes, dark as obsidian, met his with a fierce mix of fear and defiance. Colt froze. He'd seen faces like hers before, Apache, the kind of encounter that usually ended in blood. He took a step closer, slow, careful. "You hurt?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood shakily, holding a broken knife in trembling fingers. "Stay back," she whispered, voice raw, not with anger but warning. Behind her, the sand told the rest of the story. Drag marks, footprints. She hadn't come here alone. Colt kept his hand near his gun. "I ain't here to fight," he said. "Name's Colt Avery. I'm just passing through." Her eyes flicked toward the horizon, where the sun sank behind red cliffs. "If you're wise, you'll keep riding," she said. "They're coming." He looked past her, scanning the canyon mouth. "Who's coming?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Men with fire, soldiers." Her voice cracked. "My family, they took my family. I ran." The words hit like a hammer. Colt stepped closer, his voice lowered. "How many?" She swallowed hard. "4 wagons, 20 men." Colt's stomach tightened. The army sometimes called it cleansing the border. He'd seen it before. Villages burned, families vanished. He looked at her again, this woman standing proud despite the blood on her cheek. Then she said it, the words that would brand his soul forever. "Take me as your prisoner," she breathed, eyes glistening. "Say you caught me. Ride with them. Save my family." Colt's breath caught. The idea was madness. Soldiers didn't spare prisoners. They showed them off before hanging them. He studied her face, steady, unflinching. She'd already made peace with death. "You're asking me to die for strangers," he said. She stepped closer, her voice trembling but strong. "Not for strangers. For the innocent." The desert fell silent around them. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Colt looked at the sky, where the first stars bled through the haze of twilight. "You shouldn't trust a man like me," he muttered. "I don't have trust left to give." Her reply came quiet but sure. "Then borrow mine." The sound of distant drums rolled across the canyon, faint and haunting, like thunder beneath the bones of the earth. Colt turned toward it, his pulse quickening. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted, a spark in the ashes. He knew he should ride away, but he didn't. Night crawled over the canyon, slow and deliberate, like ink spilling across a page. The last of the sunset faded behind the cliffs, leaving the desert in a bruised half-light. Colt built a small fire under a cluster of rocks, its glow barely enough to keep the cold at bay. The woman sat across from him, wrapped in an old wool blanket he'd pulled from his saddle roll. She hadn't said her name yet, and he hadn't asked. Some names carried too much weight to speak aloud. Smoke drifted upward, curling like ghosts into the stars. Coyotes called from somewhere far off, their cries thin and lonely. Colt glanced toward her again. She was staring into the fire, lips trembling, but her eyes, those dark, endless eyes, did not weep. "You ever kill a man?" she asked suddenly. Colt didn't look away. "Too many." Her gaze stayed on the flames. "Then you know what they'll do if they find me." He said nothing. The crackle of the fire filled the silence between them, sharp and dry. Finally, She spoke again, voice low and steady. My name is Naya. The words seemed to hang in the air like a fragile truth. Colt nodded slowly. You got family out there? My father, my little brother, she whispered. They took them at sunrise. I ran, but... Her voice broke like a branch snapping underfoot. Colt looked at the fire again, seeing faces he'd buried long ago. He didn't believe in saving people. Not anymore. But something in her tone, some raw, wordless plea, cut deeper than any bullet. He rose and stepped away from the fire, scanning the horizon. The night wind came cold and dry from the north, carrying the faint sound of horses. He turned sharply. They're closer than I thought. Naya stood, clutching the blanket tighter. You can still leave, she said. They won't find me if I run. Colt shook his head. No, they'll find you. They always do. His voice was rough, stripped of any comfort. He moved to his horse, checking the saddle straps, tightening his revolver belt. The drums were louder now, steady, rhythmic, like the march of ghosts. The army sound carried differently in the dark, metallic, hollow, cruel. Colt turned back to her. If I take you in as my prisoner, you follow my lead. No words, no fear. You understand? She nodded once. He could see her hands shaking, though she tried to hide it. He pulled an old piece of rope from his saddlebag and looped it loosely around her wrists. It wasn't tight enough to hurt, just enough to look real. You don't have to do this, she murmured. He met her eyes. I already am. Then he kicked dirt over the fire, smothering its glow until nothing but embers remained. The canyon fell into silence again, broken only by the soft scrape of boots and the nervous snort of his mare. He swung up into the saddle, pulling Naya gently behind him. The drums were fading now, replaced by the faint clang of metal and the echo of voices. Soldiers were near. Colt nudged his horse forward, riding into the black mouth of the desert, where danger waited like an open hand. Behind them, the fire's last ember winked out, swallowed by the dark. Dawn broke slow and red across the desert, painting the horizon like a wound. Colt rode with Naya tied behind him, the mare's hooves kicking up clouds of gold dust that caught the morning light. The air smelled of sage and gun oil. In the distance, thin plumes of smoke rose from the valley, an army camp. He slowed his horse near a line of jagged rocks and studied the camp below. Soldiers moved like ants around their fires, cleaning rifles, packing mules, sharpening blades. Naya's breath was shallow against his back. You still want to go through with this? He asked quietly. If it saves my brother, she answered, I'll do whatever it takes. Her voice didn't tremble this time. Colt nodded, jaw tight. He had no plan beyond getting her inside alive. Lies were easy, surviving them wasn't. He rode down the slope, the sun burning his shoulders, until shouts of sentries cracked the air. Rifles lifted. Hold up, one called. Colt slowed, raising a hand. Got one for you, he said. Apache runner. Found her near the river. The lieutenant who approached wore his arrogance like armor. Clean boots, perfect posture, eyes that had never seen mercy. Name, he asked. Colt Marston, the cowboy said flatly. Used to track for Colonel Hensley. The lieutenant smirked. Used to. Colt didn't answer. The man's gaze shifted to Naya. You caught her alone? Track said 2 others, maybe more. I figure she ran. Smart girl, the lieutenant murmured. We'll see if her tongue's as sharp as her legs. His words crawled under Colt's skin. They led them into the camp. Soldiers stopped to stare, their laughter low and mean. Naya kept her head down, but Colt saw the tension in her shoulders. He hated that look, half shame, half fury. The lieutenant gestured toward a canvas tent near the center of camp. We'll keep her here till Hensley returns. He'll want to look himself. Colt dismounted, his boots sinking into the sand. That's not what we agreed, he said. My pay was for delivery, not display. The lieutenant's grin was all teeth. You'll get your money when I say you will. Colt's hand hovered near his gun, but he stopped himself. Not yet. The soldiers dragged Naya toward the tent, the rope biting into her wrists. She didn't cry out, though the pain showed in her eyes. Colt turned away before they could see the rage building behind his calm. He walked to his horse, pretended to check the saddle, and whispered low so no one else could hear, "I'll get you out. Tonight." For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she gave the smallest nod, almost invisible in the morning glare. The camp settled into a cruel kind of order. Fires burned low, tin plates clattered, and laughter came from the whiskey barrel near the tents. Colt stayed near the edge, sharpening his knife, pretending to belong. But every sound pressed against him. The rustle of boots, the crack of a whip, the distant cry of crows circling high above. He could almost hear the echo of the drums again, far off in the canyons, like a warning carried by wind. As the sun climbed higher, the heat thickened. Sweat traced the lines of old scars across his neck. The longer he stayed, the heavier his lie became, sitting on his chest like a loaded gun. By midday, he'd already decided. When night came, he would either free her or die trying. Night came slow, stretching shadows across the camp like long fingers of smoke. The moon was half-shrouded in drifting clouds, and the firelight flickered low, turning faces into ghostly masks. Colt sat by the fence line, knife in hand, pretending to carve a piece of wood, but his eyes were fixed on the command tent where Nia was kept. Every few minutes, a soldier's laugh broke the silence, or a boot scrape against gravel, but otherwise the camp slept under a blanket of uneasy calm. Colt's horse shifted restlessly beside him, catching the scent of whiskey and sweat on the wind. "Easy, girl," he whispered, running a hand down her neck. He counted the sentries, 3 near the outer posts, 2 pacing near the fire, 1 by the tent. Too many for comfort. He'd pulled off worse odds before, but never with someone else's life in the balance. A whisper of memory flickered through him. Another night, another village, a family he couldn't save. He shut it down. Tonight would be different. When the clouds thickened and the fire dimmed, Colt rose. He moved like smoke, silent, measured, part of the darkness itself. The sand gave beneath his boots with barely a sound. He slipped behind a wagon, the barrel of his revolver catching a faint glint of moonlight. One guard turned to spit into the dirt. Colt waited. Then he struck, fast and clean, a hand over the man's mouth, the blade sliding deep beneath the ribs. The body went limp, folding soundlessly into the dust. Colt dragged it behind a stack of crates and moved on. The next guard never saw him. Only the dull thud of his collapse broke the rhythm of the night. When Colt reached the tent, the last guard was nodding off, rifle balanced against his shoulder. Colt drew his revolver and pressed the cold barrel to the man's temple. "Sleep's over," he muttered. The man's eyes flew open, but the cowboy's silence said enough. He motioned him away from the tent, a warning in his gaze. "Walk. Don't talk." When the guard stumbled into the darkness, Colt slipped inside. The air inside the tent was thick with candle wax and dust. Nia sat against the far post, wrist bound, her face pale beneath the shadows. When she saw him, disbelief flickered, then something sharper. Hope. Colt crouched and cut the ropes loose. "You ready?" he whispered. She hesitated only a breath before nodding. Outside, the wind began to rise, hissing through the camp like a whispered secret. They slipped out the back, staying low between the tents. Every noise felt like a gunshot. A dog barked once in the distance, and Colt froze, revolver steady. The camp stirred, a few muffled voices calling out. They hurried toward the fence, boots sinking into soft earth. The mare was waiting, reins tied to a post, ears twitching. Colt lifted Nia onto the saddle and swung up behind her. "Hold tight," he said. Then he kicked hard, and the horse lunged forward, bursting to the line of wagons just as the first shout rang out behind them. Gunfire split the night. Bullets hissed past like angry hornets, cutting through the darkness. Colt fired twice without looking back, more to scare than to kill. The horse thundered across the open plain, her hooves drumming against the desert floor. Nia clung to him, her breath ragged, her hair whipping wild in the wind. The world blurred into silver and black, the horizon endless and cold. Behind them, the camp erupted in chaos, voices and gunshots fading into the distance. For a moment, it felt like they might actually make it. But then, from a far ridge, a flare shot into the sky. bursting red against the stars. The light washed over them like blood. Colt knew what it meant. They were being hunted now. The desert swallowed them whole by dawn. Colt and Naya rode through a labyrinth of red rock and wind, the canyons rising like silent giants on either side. The sun was still low, throwing long shadows that clung to ground like ghosts. Colt slowed the mare to a trot, her flanks heaving, foam streaking down her neck. They'd ridden through half the night, and the horse's breath came in ragged bursts. Naya looked back, eyes scanning the distant ridges. "They'll track us," she whispered. Colt nodded, rubbing grit from his jaw. "Then we keep moving." His voice was low, hoarse from dust and silence. The canyon narrowed ahead, curling into a bend where the air smelled faintly of water. They followed it until they reached a stream trickling between the stones, a thin silver vein in the heart of the desert. Colt dismounted, his boots sinking into the damp sand, and crouched to drink. The water was cold, almost sweet after the dry taste of gunpowder still on his tongue. Naya knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she cupped the stream. For the first time since he'd found her, her voice softened. "You didn't have to come back for me." Colt wiped his mouth on his sleeve. "Didn't figure you'd last long in their hands." "You don't even know me," she said. He looked at her for a moment, the silence thick between them. "Don't need to." The words came out harder than he meant. They rested for a while in the shade of a rock face, the mare grazing nearby. Colt cleaned his revolver, checking each chamber with practiced precision, while Naya wrapped her wrist where the rope had burned her skin. "My family," she began quietly. "They're hidden in the old caves past the ridge. If we make it there, they'll help you." He glanced up, meeting her eyes. "Help me what?" "To live," she said. The simplicity of it struck him harder than a bullet. He'd spent years riding from one bounty to the next, trading lives for coin, never thinking much about his own. Living had never been part of the plan. Now, sitting in the cool hush of the canyon with her voice echoing softly against the stone, he realized how long it had been since someone spoke to him without fear or hate. He looked away before the thought could dig too deep. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest sound. Hooves, far off but closing. Colt froze. The rhythm was too steady for wild horses. "Soldiers." He stood, scanning the canyon mouth. "Time to go." Naya sprang to her feet as he untied the mare. They rode deeper into the maze of rock, the walls tightening around them, the sound of pursuit growing louder. Colt guided the horse through a narrow split in the cliff, just wide enough for one rider. Sunlight flickered off the stone, painting their faces in flashes of gold and shadow. Behind them, voices shouted, closer now. Colt turned down another path, then another, trusting his instincts more than his memory. The canyon twisted like a serpent, the way out uncertain. When they finally burst into a clearing, the light was blinding. A dry plateau stretched ahead, the air rippling with heat. They were exposed. Colt dismounted and motioned for silence. Naya crouched beside him, her breath ragged. "How many?" she whispered. "Too many," he muttered, loading his last bullet. He looked up at the sky, now white with noon, and felt the weight of the sun pressing down. Somewhere a hawk screamed, sharp and distant. The sound carried to the canyon, like an omen. The first gunshot cracked the silence. Gunfire shattered the silence, echoing off the canyon walls like thunder trapped between stone. Colt dropped low, pulling Naya with him behind a jagged boulder as bullets hissed through the air, kicking up sand and splinters of rock. The mare reared, whinnying in terror before bolting toward the far ridge. "Damn it," Colt muttered, cocking his revolver. He peeked out, counting flashes of light from the ridge. 4, maybe 5 soldiers fanning out. The canyon turned into a furnace of noise and dust. Naya pressed herself against the stone, her eyes wide, breath coming fast. "They won't stop," she whispered. "Not till we're dead." Colt reloaded with steady hands. "Then they'll have to earn it." His voice was calm, almost too calm. He leaned out, aimed, and fired twice. One soldier dropped, tumbling backward into the dust. Another shouted, returning fire. The bullet ricocheted off the rock beside Colt's ear, stinging him with grit. He ducked back, the metallic taste of fear mixing with the dry air. We can't stay pinned, he said. We move when I say. Naya nodded, clutching the edge of her torn shawl. The look in her eyes wasn't just fear. It was something deeper, something that reminded him of the way soldiers used to stare before charging into hell. When the next lull came, Colt grabbed her wrist. Now! They sprinted toward a split in the cliff, boots pounding the ground, gunfire chasing their heels. Dust rose around them, thick as smoke. Colt fired blind over his shoulder, the shots cracking sharp in the heat. They dove behind a fallen slab of stone, just as another bullet whined past. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Naya pointed up. There, see the narrow path? It twisted up the canyon wall like a scar, steep and dangerous. Colt followed her gaze, jaw tight. You climb first, he said. I'll cover you. They'll kill you. Maybe. He smiled faintly, a hard, tired smile. But you'll live? She hesitated, searching his face for something. Hope, maybe a lie, but found neither. She climbed. The rocks scraped her palms raw, the sun burning her back, every breath a prayer. Below, Colt fired again and again, each shot echoing higher into the canyon, until his gun clicked empty. He threw the useless revolver aside and grabbed his knife. The nearest soldier appeared over the ridge, rifle raised. Colt met him halfway, the blade flashing once, twice, before the man fell. Blood mixed with dust at his boots. Another soldier charged, swinging a rifle like a club. Colt blocked the blow, the impact jarring up his arm. He slashed back, panting, the air hot and dry in his lungs. Above, Naya reached the ledge and turned, screaming his name. Colt! He looked up just as a final soldier leveled his gun. The world slowed. The crack tore through the canyon, echoing forever. Colt staggered, hand to his side. The red spread quick beneath his shirt. He dropped to one knee, forcing a breath. Go! He shouted hoarsely. Run. But Naya didn't move. Instead, she scrambled down halfway, sliding on the loose rock. The soldier reloaded, cursing under his breath. Colt lunged forward, driving his knife into the man's chest before the next shot could fire. Both men went down in a cloud of dust. The canyon went quiet again, save for the wind whispering over the rocks. Colt tried to rise but fell back hard, vision swimming. Naya reached him, her hands trembling as she pressed against the wound. You fool, she whispered, tears streaking through the dirt on her face. He looked at her, a faint grin tugging at his lips. You're free now. No, she said, shaking her head, voice breaking. Not without you. The wind carried her words away, scattering them into the wide, merciless desert. Somewhere beyond the canyon, a hawk cried again, its sound sharp, mournful, and endless. The desert stretched before them like an endless furnace, sunlight bleaching the red rock into ghostly white. Colt's side burned with every breath, each step sending hot, sharp pain through his ribs. Naya steadied him, gripping his arm, her own hand smeared with dust and blood. The mare moved cautiously across the cracked earth, ears twitching to every distant sound. They'd left the canyon behind, but the army's shadow lingered, a threat in every rising wind. Colt's lips were dry, sand sticking to the sweat glistening on his skin. You need to keep moving, he muttered, forcing each word through gritted teeth. Naya didn't hesitate. Her jaw was set, eyes scanning the horizon. The desert was unforgiving, no shade, no water for miles. Each step was a gamble. Colt felt the weight of the wound in his side, heavy as the desert sky above. He had always believed survival was about skill, speed, and grit. But now it was about something else. Stubbornness, desperation, the flicker of trust that had grown between them. They found a shallow cave, hidden behind a jagged boulder, and collapsed inside. Colt pressed his hands against the wound, trying to stem the flow. Naya worked quickly, tearing strips from her shawl to bind him. You can't stop now, she said, voice tight. Not when we're so close. Colt swallowed hard, tasting blood and grit. You mean my death isn't coming soon enough? He asked with a grim humor he didn't feel. She shook her head, eyes fierce. I won't let it be. Outside, the wind carried a dry howl, shifting sand into tiny whirlwinds. Somewhere far off, a hawk circled, screaming. Silence pressed against the cave walls, broken only by their breathing and the occasional scuff of the mare shifting outside. Colt's vision blurred as he tried to focus on lines of the rock, the small fissures in the stone, anything to keep his mind from spiraling into panic. He had never trusted anyone, and now he trusted her completely. That was dangerous, almost as dangerous as the army closing in. Hours passed. The sun dipped low, casting long, burning shadows across the desert. Colt felt faint, the heat pressing against his skull like a hammer. Naya kept vigil, her hands never leaving his. She spoke little, whispering words of encouragement, a mix of hope and prayer that somehow seemed real. Colt's fingers flexed, finding the strength to lift his head. "How far to your family?" he asked. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "A day's ride if we push the mare hard." His jaw tightened. One day. He didn't know if he had a day left. Each throb of pain was a reminder that the desert wasn't forgiving. "Then we ride at first light," he said. "No more hiding." Naya nodded, leaning against him for warmth as night fell and the temperature plunged, sand giving way to cold. The desert was silent now, vast and empty, yet it felt alive. Every wind gust, every distant coyote, every whispering stone seemed to watch them. Colt realized the truth. Survival wasn't enough anymore. He wanted more. He wanted to see this through, to keep her alive, to see her family again. As the first stars appeared, tiny and sharp against the deepening sky, Colt whispered, "We'll make it. Somehow." Naya's hand brushed his cheek. "I believe you," she said, voice soft, almost a prayer. A wind gust rattled the cave entrance. Colt froze, sensing something beyond the horizon. The army had not given up, and the desert, endless and merciless, was about to test them both to the limit. The first light of dawn bled over the horizon, casting the desert in muted gold and gray. Colt rose slowly, each movement stabbing at his side like iron. Naya helped him mount the mare, her hands steady but trembling. The air was dry and hot, carrying the scent of dust and distant sage. Behind them, the canyon walls had receded, leaving the open desert stretching in all directions, endless and indifferent. "We keep moving," Colt said, voice tight with pain. Naya nodded, gripping him around the waist as the mare stepped forward, hooves thudding rhythmically in the cracked sand. The army's distant shouts reached them faintly, carried by the wind, like the echo of doom brushing against the desert floor. Colt's vision swam with each step, sweat and blood streaking his face. Yet he kept going, eyes fixed on the distant ridge where Naya's family was hidden, their only hope rising like a fragile shadow against the sun. By mid-morning, the desert had become an oven. Heat shimmered off rocks and sand, creating illusions of water that weren't there. Colt's breathing was shallow, each inhalation a knife against his lungs. Naya urged him forward, whispering words that were part prayer, part command. "You can do this," she said. Almost there. Ahead, a narrow pass appeared between two cliffs, jagged teeth of stone that promised both concealment and danger. Colt dismounted and led the mare, feeling every ounce of his injury in the sweat and grit of the climb. They reached the top, and below, hidden in a shaded crevice, were signs of life. Smoke from a small fire, the low murmur of voices and movement. Naya's eyes brightened. "Father," she whispered. Colt's lips pressed together. Relief would have to wait. He was still a target, still bleeding, still hunted. Suddenly, a shout split the air. A scout from the army had spotted them, a distant rifle glinting in the sun. Colt pressed Naya to the ground behind a boulder, the mare huffing beside them. Bullets thudded against the rock, throwing up dust. Colt returned fire, each shot measured, careful, while Naya ducked low. Time stretched into a blur of sun, rock, and flying sand. He realized then how much he depended on her presence, her calm under fire, the trust that had grown between them in a few short hours. He gritted his teeth, thinking of the countless men he had known and lost. None of them mattered as much as keeping her alive. With a shout, he kicked the mare into a sudden charge down the slope, Naya holding tight. The army fired blindly, the echoes bouncing between cliffs, but Colt's instinct carried them through. When they reached the shaded crevice, Naya's father and younger brother emerged, eyes wide and alive. Relief washed through her, and Colt felt the weight of exhaustion press into him. Yet even as they embraced, Colt's pain flared, and he slumped to one knee. Her father looked to him, recognition dawning. "You saved her," he said. Colt shook his head, voice rough. "We saved each other." Naya knelt beside him, pressing her hand to his chest, a silent acknowledgment of what had been endured, what had been risked. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying the distant cries of the defeated soldiers fading into the distance. Colt closed his eyes, listening to the rhythm of Naya's heartbeat, the quiet of the canyon, the soft steps of her family approaching. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope. But as he opened his eyes, the desert stretched before him, endless and impartial. Survival was theirs for now, yet he knew the price of mercy could return at any moment. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the desert watched, and the story was far from over.